back to Leah's Lifestyle. Today we're doing book club, The Highly Sensitive Person. We were in the middle of chapter 4, if I remember correctly, from the last time we were reading. And we were heading to chapter 5, which we were not too far from. So let's get to chapter 5. And then we will get going. Are you guys ready? Get your books or sit down and get ready to listen. I think did this one continue over here? It did. Okay, I think we were on page 76, it looks like. So if you would like to join in reading with me today, we are starting on page 76. Let's get into it. The sensitive little girl, mother's special companions. In contrast to shy boys, girls seen as shy get along well with their mothers. They are good ones. The problem here is that sensitive girls can be overprotected. In the sensitive daughter, a mother may find the child she dreams of, the one who will not, should not, and cannot leave home, all of which dampens the sensitive little girl's natural urge to explore and overcome her fears. Girls at every age show more negative effects, including withdrawals from the world, from the negative attitudes their mother has shown towards them. Criticism, rejection, coldness. This is probably far more true for sensitive girls. Moreover, fathers often forget to help their daughters overcome their fears. Finally, overall, little girls are more affected by both parents, for better or worse. Having read all of this, it is time to think about the ways in which you need to be different kind
Leah's
of
Lifestyle 95 is now live.
Of course, it wants
Streaming
to
reading fun.
I'll turn that off while I do this. Having read all this, and times to think about the ways in which you need to be a different kind of parent to yourself now. To begin, do your self-assessment of how you cope with threats of over-arousal. I don't like looking down. It's bothering me. Being a different kind of parent to yourself. Some situations are overstimulating because they are too intense or long. The child in you cannot bear the fireworks, cannot take another hour at the carnival. Reading the previous chapter should have helped you to take your infant body seriously when it has had enough. But sometimes it is doing fine, but afraid of what is coming, of the idea of seeing the fireworks or riding the Ferris wheel. When new situations produce overstimulation because they are unfamiliar, and unfamiliar things in the past have turned out to be upsetting. Naturally we reject everything new about trying it. That means we can miss out on a lot. In order to be willing to try new things, you need plenty of experience from facing new situations and doing okay. For an HSP, doing well in new circumstances is never automatic. Parents who understand their highly sensitive kids developed a step-by-step strategy. Then the children themselves eventually learn to apply it to themselves. If your parents did not teach you step-by-step, it is time you learn to teach yourself the style of meeting the unfamiliar. I have adapted here some of the advice on the shy child from the Alice Lieberman's Emotional Life of the Toddler, to be used by grown-ups when we feel afraid to enter new situations. 1. Just like a parent does not send a toddler into a new situation alone, do not do that to yourself. Take someone else along. Just as a parent begins by talking about the situation with the child, talk to the fearful part of yourself. Focus on what is familiar and safe. 3. Just as a parent keeps the promise that the child can leave if he or she becomes too upset, allow yourself to go home if you need to. 4. Just as a parent is confident the child will be okay after a while, expect a accept the part of yourself that is afraid to be okay after some time to adjust to all the unfamiliar situation. 5. Just as a parent is careful to not respond to a child's fear with more concern than is justified by the situation, if the part that is fearful needs help, respond with no more anxiety than the braver part of you thinks is justified. Remember, too, that over-arousal can be mistaken for the anxiety. A good parent to yourself might say, "There sure is a lot of going on here. It makes your heart pound with excitement, doesn't it?" Okay, we're going to go back because there's a how to cope with threats of over-arousal here. Do not hesitate to check several of the statements below, even if they seem inconsistent. Just check the items that apply to you. Make each answer independent of the one before. When I am afraid of trying something new, or I am on the verge of being overstimulated or over-aroused, I usually try to escape the situation. Yeah. Look for ways to control the situation. Yes. Expect to be able to endure it in some way. Yeah. Feel a rising sense of fear that everything may go wrong now. Yes. Seek out someone I can trust to help me, or at least keep that person in mind. I do this now. Get away from everyone so that at least no one can add to the problem. I do this now. Trying to be with others, friends, family, a group I know well, or no, I don't do that at all. Vow to try even harder to avoid it and everything like it, no matter how much I miss out. It depends. Complain, get angry, or do whatever I must to get those responsible to stop distressing me. I do now. Focus on calming down and trying to take things one step at a time. I do now. Your own methods. All these have their place. Even fear, which can mobilize us to act, but some are obviously better suited to some situations than others. So flexibility is key. If you use fewer than 3, you should look at the list again and think about adopting more. Who taught you these methods? What might have happened to prevent you from using more of them? Recognizing these childhood sources of your coping reasons can help you see what is still useful and what is no longer necessary. Okay, so I think I'm going to take a note here then, just because there are questions here. I'm going to be a little specific here. I'm going to say, right, page 77, just like we have been. And then I'm going to start my question. And the question is, who taught you these methods? So I'm going to say, who taught me my coping mechanisms that I use today? Okay. What might have happened to prevent you from using more of them? Okay. Alright. And that's that. So now we get to go on to the next page. Weighting special needs against the risk of lasting discouragement. Perhaps the most difficult task is deciding how much to protect yourself, how much to gently push yourself forward. It is the problem all parents of sensitive children face. You probably know how to put pressure on yourself. You do it just the way your parents, teachers, and friends did. Few HSPs escape the pressure to be a good sport, normal, or pleasing to others, and even when those others are long gone, you keep on trying to please them. You imitate their failure to accept your special need to be buffered. In the terms of the last chapter, you tend to be out too much, or you may have imitated overprotection, which may have been nothing but a failure to help you when you were both afraid and eager to try something within your ability. In that case, you may be in too much. How discouraging to watch your friends enjoying something you are too afraid to try. Do you underestimate such discouragement? It can be just as present in adulthood as you see friends taking on careers, travel, moves, and relationships that you would fear. Yet deep inside, you also know you have the same or more talent, desire, and potential. Envy can wake us up to one or two truths. We want something and better do something about it while we still can, or we want something and just cannot have it. As you saw in this chapter 2, and Rothbard's description of how we develop, adult humans are capable of directing attention, using willpower, and deciding to overcome a fear. If your envy is strong and you decide you want to do something, you probably can. Another equally important part of growing up is no longer pretending we will be able to do absolutely everything. Life is short and filled with limits and responsibilities. We each get a piece of the good to enjoy, just as we each contribute to pieces of that good to the world. But none of us can have it all for ourselves or do it all for others. I have noticed that not all HSPs feel discouraged by not being able to do everything their peers do. They have little envy. They appreciate their trait and know it gives them much that others lack. I think this discouragement, like the failure to buffer ourselves, come from attitudes learned in early childhood. You know what's crazy is I feel like though it doesn't discourage me, it also discourages me. I find that I'm a very dual-wield person when it comes to emotions, that typically I have this double viewpoint on things, and this is one of them, where accepting that I won't be able to do everything like other people kind of makes me really sad, because I really wanted, that's all I wanted as a kid, that's all I wanted to have. But at the same time, I'm not envious, because I don't really want everything that everyone else has in the way that they have it. I want to do things differently, and I enjoy that about myself. So it can be very complicated, you know? It's never too late to overcome discouragement. While it is wise to accept what we cannot change about ourselves, it is also good to remember that we are never too old to replace discouragement with bits and pieces of confidence and hope. As a child, I had a special sensitivity to falling, which spiraled into over-arousal and a loss of coordination whenever I was up high or relying on my own balance. Thus, I never insisted on being taught things like riding a bicycle, roller skating, or ice skating, which I think only relieved my mother. Thus, I have always been more of an envious observer than a participant in physical activities, but there have been glowing acceptations, such as what happened at the end of the summer solstice celebration I attended in California on a ranch in the foothills of the Sierras. The women at the event were of all ages, but in the evening, when they had found a swing, they became a group of young girls. The swing was on a long rope and swept out over a slope. In the twilight, it was like flying to the stars, or so they said. Everyone had tried it except me. When the others had wandered indoors, I stayed, looking at the swing and feeling the old shame of being the scared cat, even though probably no one had noticed. Then a woman much younger than I appeared and offered to show me how to use the swing. I said no, I didn't want to, but she ignored that. She promised she would never push me harder than I wanted, and she held out the swing. It took me some time, but somehow I felt safe with her, and I built up the courage to swing out towards the stars like the others. I never saw the young woman again, but I will always be grateful not only for the experience, but for the respect and the understanding she showed as she taught me how, one gentle swing at a time. That's so sweet. That's what I want to do for people. Your school years. Marcia's memories of her school years were typical of an HSP. She's excellent in school and was even a kind of a leader when it came to plans and ideas. She was also bored. Her restless imagination led her to read books during lessons. Still, she was unusually the smartest. At the same time that she was bored, the overstimulation of school always bothered her. She recalls best just the noise. It did not frighten her, but especially if the teacher left the room. The noise was unbearable. The racket at home, 8 people in a tiny house, also made her miserable. In good weather, she hid in trees and under the porch and read books. In bad weather, she just learned to tune everything out while she read. At school, however, over-arousal can be harder to avoid. One day, the teacher read aloud some newspaper accounts of the horrible tortures of certain prisoners of war. Marcia passed out. When you started school, like Marcia, you encountered the wider world. The first shock may have been the separation from home, but even if you were prepared for that by going to preschool, your senses could never be prepared for the long, noisy day in the average primary grade classroom. At best, your teacher maintained a range of stimulation that worked for the average child's optimal level of arousal. For you, it was almost always excessive. Probably at first you dealt with school by withdrawing and just observing. I recall well my son's first day in school. He went to the corner and stared as if drumsticks. But silent watching is not normal, the teacher says. The others are playing, why don't you? Rather than displeasing the teacher or being seen as odd, maybe you overcame your reluctance, or maybe you simply could not, in which case more and more attention came your way, just what you did not need. Jens Assenprof of the Max Planck Institute of Psychology in Munchies has written on how normal it is for some children to prefer to play alone. At home, parents usually sense that doing so is just part of their child's personality, but at school things are different. By second grade, playing alone causes a child to be rejected by other children and an object of concern for teachers. For some of you, all this over-arousal and shame led to poor classroom performance. Most of you, however, being fond of reading, quiet study, excellent in schoolwork. It was the development of school or physical skills that was hampered by your over-arousal. To handle that, perhaps you found a close friend to play with, and perhaps you had the reputation of being the one who thought up the best games, wrote the best stories, and painted the best pictures. Indeed, if you had entered school with confidence about yourself and your trait, as did Charles in Chapter 1, you may have been a real leader. If not, as one sensitive friend of mine, a physicist, said, can you think of anyone really great who had any easy time of it in school? No, not really. But you know what? I feel like school is very similar to me. Like, I felt like I was smart until I felt like I was dumb, and then I felt overworked and overwhelmed. I found myself daydreaming a lot, trying to leave the room, because things took so long, you know? Like, it was one of those things where they take so long to explain something, and I'm just like, dude, get to the point. Like, I feel like you're beating it into my head for no other reason than because you want to. And then Leah asked the question, I'm like, I don't know, you took forever to explain, I don't really understand. Like, why did we take a whole half hour to an hour class to explain one chapter of a book? Like, I don't know. Math classes weren't that bad for me. I could pay attention to them. They were typically, depends on the teacher though. I think it depends on the teaching style. Because I really struggled in Spanish for most classes, but then had one teacher I did really good in with. Anyways. Schoolboys, schoolgirls. In my research, I found that by school age, most male HSPs were introverts. That makes sense. Since a sensitive boy is not normal, they had to be careful in groups or with strangers to see how they were going to be treated. Sensitive girls, like sensitive boys, often rely on one or two friends throughout their school years, but some of them are fairly extroverted. Unlike the boys, if they display some over-arousal or emotions, they are doing what is expected of them. It may even help them to be accepted by the other girls. The negative side of this permission to be emotional, however, can be that a sensitive girl is never forced to put on the armor that sensitive boys have to do to survive. Girls may have little practice in emotional control and feel helpless in the face of emotional over-arousal, or they may use their emotions to manipulate others, including to protect themselves from over-arousal. If we have to play the game again, I'm going to cry. The straightforward, self-asserted needed in adulthood is not expected or wanted from them. Giftedness. If you are labeled gifted, your childhood may have been easier. Your sensitivity was understood as part of a larger trait that was more socially acceptable. There existed better advice to teachers and parents concerning gifted children. For example, one researcher reminded parents that such children cannot be expected to blend well with their peers. Parents will not produce a spoiled freak if they give their child special treatment and extra opportunities. Parents and teachers are firmly told to allow gifted children to just be who they are. This is good advice for children with all traits that miss the average and ideal. But giftedness is valued enough to permit deviations from the norm. There is some good and bad in everything. However, parents or teachers may have pressured you. Your self-worth may have been entirely contingent upon your achievements, meaning while if you were not with gifted peers, you would be lonely and possibly rejected. There are now some better guidelines for raising gifted children. I have adopted them for reparenting your gifted self. Reparenting your gifted self. 1. Appreciate yourself for being, not doing. 2. Praise yourself for taking risks and learning something new rather than for your successes. It will help you cope with failure. 3. Try not to constantly compare yourself to others. It invites excessive competition. 4. Give yourself opportunity to interact with other gifted people. 5. Do not overschedule yourself. Allow time to think, to daydream. 6. Keep your expectations realistic. 7. Do not hide your abilities. 8. Be your own advocate. Support your right to be yourself. 9. Accept it when you have narrow interests or broad ones. About this last point, maybe you just want to study neurotriosis. Neutrons. Maybe you just want to study neutrons. I hate when they separate the word. It really fucks my brain. And nothing else. Or maybe you just want to read, travel, study, or talk until you figure out the meaning of human life on this planet. It takes both types to make a world. Besides, you will probably change at another stage in life. More will be said about giftedness in adults, a neglected topic in Chapter 6. The highly sensitive adolescent. Adolescence is a difficult time for anyone, but many researchers have found that on the average, HSPs support their high school years as the most difficult of all. There are mind-boggling biological changes and the rapid addition of one adult responsibility after another, driving, vocations, or college choices. The proper use of alcohol and drugs, potential parenthood, being trusted with children and jobs as babysitters or camp counselors, and little things like keeping track of ID, money, and keys. Then there is this big one, the awakening of sexual feelings and the painful self-consciousness that it brings. Sensitive youth seem bound to feel uneasy with the sexual roles of victim or aggressor that they the media imply they are expected to play. It is also possible, however, to displace energy or anxiety into sex because the real source of the anxiety is harder to face. Think of the pressure to make choices that will determine your entire life, with no idea of the outcome. The expectation that you'll leave the home you'll always know and to do so gladly or at least resolutely. The fear that now your fatal flaw will reveal itself fully as you fail to make the expected transition to independent living. It is not surprising that many sensitive adolescents meet the crisis by destroying their budding self so they will not have to watch it to fail to bloom right. And there are plenty of ways to self destruct, marrying or having a baby in a way that imprisons one in a narrow, prescribed role, abusing drugs or alcohol, becoming physically or mentally incapacitated, joining a cult or an organization that offers security and answers, or suicide. It is not that all of these behaviors are caused by being sensitive or that the tough planet that it is will not survive some of them and be a late bloomer. But these escapes, available to all adolescents, are used by some HSPs as well. Of course, for many of the duties of adulthood are postponed by going to college. Then there may be graduate school, a postdoctorate, and an internship. Or one finds another way to assume life's duties very gradually, delaying as opposed to avoidance. And a fine tactic, another form of the method of learning I call step by step. Never feel bad by using it for a while. Maybe you delayed leaving home. You lived with parents for a few years, worked for them for a while, or moved in with a hometown high school friends. Becoming a functioning adult step by step really works fine. Suddenly, one day you are an adult, doing it all, and you never noticed how you got there. Sometimes, however, we take too big a step. College can be that for some HSPs. I have known so many HSPs who dropped out after their first term or after their first return home, often at Christmas. Neither they nor their parents nor their counselors understand the real problem. Overstimulation from a whole new life, new people, new ideas, new life plans, plus living in a noisy dorm and staying up all night talking or partying, plus probably experimenting with sex, drugs, and alcohol, or nursing your friends through their after effects of their experiments. Even when the sensitive student would rather withdraw and rest, there is that pressure to do what others do, be normal, keep up, make friends, satisfy everyone's expectations. Whatever troubles you had in college should be reframed. It was not some personal failure. Not surprisingly, a good home life helps all adolescents a great deal, even at the time for leaving the nest. The enduring influence of the home is especially strong for HSPs. By adolescence, your family had taught you a great deal about how you can and should behave in the real world. Oh man, that's a rough one right there. I know we're so close to getting to chapter 5, but I just need to make like a little note here talking about my feelings about that last section. Okay. let's move on. Page 85. When sensitive boys and girls become men and women, as highly sensitive adolescents become adults, the difference between the genders increase. Like tiny variations in directions at the start of the trip, difference in upbringings can cause sensitive men and women to arrive at very different destinations. In general, men have higher self-esteem than women. When parents appreciate their sensitive boy, as in the case of Charles in chapter 1, then, as an adult, he will have great self-confidence. At the other extreme, I found many highly sensitive men who were filled with self-loathing, not surprising, given the rejections they had experienced. A study of men who had been shy since childhood, I assume that most were HSPs, found that they married an average of 3 years later than other men, had their first child 4 years later, and began a stable career 3 years later, which in turn tended to lead to lower professional achievements. This could reflect culturally prejudice against shy men or lower self-confidence. It could also indicate that kind of caution and delaying that is healthy for an HSP, or the valuing of other things besides family and career, perhaps spiritual or artistic goals. At any rate, if you have been slow to take these steps, you have plenty of company. In contrast, the same study found that shy women went through the traditional stages of life right on time. A shy woman was far less likely to have worked at all or to have continued working when she married, as if availing herself of the patriarchal tradition of going from her father's house to her husband's without having to learn to support herself. Yet in high school, these same women tend to have a quiet independence, an interest in things intellectual, a high aspirational level, and inner directedness. One can only imagine that tension in these women's lives created by that quiet independence, the need to follow their inner direction, and their sense that the only safe, quiet oasis for them was a traditional marriage. Many of the women I interviewed felt that their first marriages were mistakes, attempted to deal with their sensitivity through adding another person to their life or by assuming a safe role. I do not know if their divorce rate is any higher, but their reasons might be different from those of other women. It seems that they are eventually forced both to face the world alone and to find outlets for their strong intuition, creativity, and other talents. If their first marriages did not allow room for that growth, it became a stepping stone from one to a greater independence when they were finally ready. Marcia was certainly one such woman. She married young and waited until her 40s to develop the creative and intellectual abilities so evident to her school years. For Marcia and about a third of women I interviewed, there may have been more to this hesitancy about the world than simply sensitivity. These women had had upsetting sexual experiences. Marcia with her brothers, even without overt sexual abuse, all young women are known to experience a descent into low self-esteem at puberty, probably as they realize their role as sexual objects. The highly sensitive girl will sense all the implications even more and make self-protective a higher priority. Some overeat to become unattractive. Some overstudy or overtrain so they have no free time. Some pick one boy early and hang on to him for protection. Marcia reported that her leadership and classroom brilliance ended in junior high school. As soon as her breasts developed with above average fullness, suddenly she was drawing constant attention from boys. She wore an overcoat at school in all weather and became as inconspicuous as she could. Besides, as she put it, the leaders now were the dumb, giggly boy chasers. She could not or would not be one of them. She was often accosted by boys anyways. One day, a pair chased her and stole a kiss. She went home horrified, stepping into the house and saw an actual or visionary rat she never knew, which hurtling down the stairs at her. For 4 years after that, whenever she kissed a boy, she saw that rat. At 16, she fell in love for the first time, but broke it off when they seemed to be getting too close. She remained a virgin until 23, when she was date raped. After that, she gave herself to anyone who persisted, except the boys I really loved. Then came an abusive marriage. She long waited for the courage to divorce that man and the beginning of her artistic career. In some, once again, there is the gender difference in how sensitive is manifested. In some, once again, there is a gender difference on how sensitivity is manifested. As sensitive boys become men, they must fall out of this step with other men in the timing and the nature of their lives. Being sensitive is not normal for men. Meanwhile, for women, sensitivity is expected. Sensitive girls find it all too easy to take the path of traditional values without first learning how to be in the world. Growing up's bottom line. We grow into a highly social world. We are at the end of the chapter, but possibly the start of life's work. Learning to see your childhood in the light of your trait and reparenting yourself when necessary. Looking back, you will notice how much this chapter about growing up highly sensitive has been concerned with you and your relationships with others, with parents, relatives, peers, teachers, strangers, friends, dating partners, spouses. Humans are very social animals, even we HSPs. It seems to be time to turn to the HSP social life and this world which keeps coming up, and the state of mind called shy. Working with what you have learned, reframing your childhood. The heart of this chapter, and perhaps of this book, is the reframing of your life in terms of your sensitivity. It is the task of seeing your failures, hurts, shyness, embracing moments, and all the rest in a new way, one that is both more coolly accurate and warmly compassionate. Last, the major events you remember from the childhood and adolescence, the memories that shape who you are. These might be single moments, a school play, or the day your parents told you they were divorcing, or they might be whole categories, the first day of school each year or being sent to camp each summer. Some memories will be negative, even traumatic and tragic. Being bullied or teased, some will have even positive, but still perhaps overwhelming. Christmas morning, family vacation, success, honors. Choose one event and go through the steps of reframing, introducing in chapter 1. Think about your responses to the event and how you have always viewed it. Did you feel you responded wrong or not like others would have, or far too long? Did you decide you were no good in some way? Did you try to hide your upset from others, or did others find out and tell you that you were being too much? 2. Consider your response in the light of what you know now about how your body automatically operates, or imagine me, an author, explaining it to you. 3. Think if there's anything that needs to be done about it now. If it seems right, share your new views of the situation with someone else. Perhaps it could even be someone who was present at the time who could help you continue to fit details into the picture. Or write down your old and new views of the experiences and keep it around for a while as a reminder. If this is helpful, reframe another major childhood event in a few days until you have gone through the list. Do not rush the process. Allow a few days for each. A major event deserves time to be disguised. Okay, so digested. A major event deserves to be a major event deserves time to be digested. Okay, so pages 88 and 89. We will do those. And then tomorrow we'll come back and we'll read chapter 5, page 90. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Comment down below. What have you enjoyed about this book so far? Are you going to read the other books that have come up? Have you read those other books that have come up before? And until next time, I'll see you later.